everybody recognizes and realizes that there's still a lot of good conversation to go on.
And Chair, no action will be taken after Mayor Holmes leaves. Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Unless it's signing tasks to Mayor Honey, then
Yes.
then
I
we'll
will,
take
I will make the motion.
Volunteering him to do stuff.
So at this point, I'd ask everybody to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody. And again, thanks for everybody who's here in attendance, either to hopefully participate in the call of the audience or just to watch how, as we like to say, the sausage is made when it comes to trying to get to RTA actions and RTA next. So this time we'll go to the item 3, all the audience. Mr. Jamie Brown will lead us in that effort.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have one speaker card today, so I will introduce this item. Speakers are limited to a 3-minute oral presentation and may submit written comments of any length for the board's files. Call of the audience is limited to 30 minutes. Individual board members may respond to criticism made by those individuals who have addressed the board. However, the board will not discuss or take action on a matter raised during a call to the audience that is not already on the agenda. Our speaker is Justin Rice. Please step forward to the lectern. Please start your comment by stating your name for the record. After that, you'll have 3 minutes to address the RTA board. At the 2-minute mark, I will politely cut in and request that you wrap up your comments. You may now proceed with your comment.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Good afternoon. My name is Justin Rice. I am the president and CEO of the American Council of Engineering Companies of Arizona. Let's just say ACEC Arizona for short. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity today to address you. One thing that I am here to discuss is our membership, which is comprised of 200 engineering firms throughout the state of Arizona, which is comprised of 7,500 employees. We're here to advocate for the use of the baseline as opposed to the pessimistic view when considering the next steps with RTA. We feel strongly that the plan should use a baseline forecast in order to have enough broad appeal to the public. Quickly, I'll just go through 3 points that help support this argument. It allows the addition of projects and programs that are critical to get support from the plan or for the plan from jurisdictions and the general public. The additional 300 million from the 2.46 billion pessimistic to the 275 billion baseline can be allocated on a conditional basis depending on actual collections. Using the baseline forecast is reasonable and a defensible approach. George Hammond, U of A economist responsible for the forecast, stated that there is a 20% probability of occurrence for the pessimistic forecast. On the flip side of that, there is an 80% probability of occurrence for the baseline or optimistic scenario. Furthermore, most regions, including an association of governments located north of here, which I shall not name, uses the baseline forecast to estimate future revenues and to develop tax measures. Furthermore, there are multiple layers of conservative assumptions and contingencies built into the RTA next that were not included in 2006.
I apologize for the interruption. You're at 2 minutes.
It's just fine. I'm actually wrapping up. Thank you once again for your time. Once again, my name is Justin Rice. I am the president and CEO representing the American Council of Engineering Companies of Arizona and our firm members, as well as the employees of these firms. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Chair, we have no more comments.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Rice. Appreciate your comments. All right, with that, we'll close the call to the audience and we'll move on to item 4, procurement of transit buses for Sun Shuttle fixed route fleets. De Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and esteemed members of the RTA board. I'm pleased to present to you a crucial update regarding our ongoing efforts to enhance public transportation services within our region. On February 8th of 2023, the RTA was awarded the FTA 5339 grant funding for the acquisition of 3 expansion cutaway buses and 1 replacement cutaway bus. This grant, facilitated by the Arizona Department of Transportation, amounts to $1,051,077 with a federal match of 85% and a local match of 15%. Two of the newly acquired vehicles will significantly bolster service frequency along intercity bus route 486, which serves as a vital link between Ajo and Tucson. This route plays an essential role in serving residents of Western Pima County and the Tohono O'odham Nation, particularly amidst a notable surge in demand. The two additional Cutaway buses earmarked for procurement will be dedicated to other Sun Shuttle services operating within the greater Tucson area. To proceed with the procurement process, staff seeks approval to allocate the necessary local match of $157,000 to ADOT for the acquisition of these four vehicles. It's anticipated that the FTA 5339 grant funding will cover $893,000 of the total cost. The funds for the local match will be drawn from the RTA adopted budget ballot project number 48, specifically designed for the neighborhood circulator bus system. The procurement will be facilitated through ADOT using state-approved vendors. I want to thank ADOT for facilitating the procurement process on our behalf. Considering the significant development, I would like to request the board's approval for the allocation of the local match funds and subsequent procurement of these vehicles. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Mr. Chair,
No.
I'd like to move the item.
Second. There we have the item is moved and seconded by Supervisor Scott. Any questions for Mr. De Leon or comments? Supervisor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to request that the executive director send any pertinent information about the new bus route, the bus route 486 to Supervisor Lee's office, because I know that she has been getting questions from her constituents in Ajo about this, and I'm sure she'd appreciate any and all information.
Happy to, yes, as staff mentioned, we've been working on this for a while and be happy to provide an update, and this is a good news to share. Thank
very
you.
much.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to comment that I'm really happy to see additional federal funds coming to our region and the RTA investment in this important regional transit route. What I did want to ask, are there any options for electric or hybrid for this procurement that's being considered?
Mr. De Leon, do you have an answer for that, or is that going to fall on the executive director?
I'll be happy to, again, this is very specific. There's already a procurement process and a bid. I believe we would have to work with ADOT, but my guess would be anything other than what we have would be significantly more expensive. So we don't have the budget for it at this time.
So just a follow up on that, do we have as a regional transportation authority any plan to move ourselves from diesel buses and vans to a much more climate conscious option?
And Executive Director, I'd add on that, is that something that would be part of a PAG decision-making process, or can that be RTA specific?
So I would probably more specifically to this topic, to stay to the agenda item, I would say that we follow the requirements of the grant, and this was a grant funded project, and obviously we were pursuing any opportunities. So if there are other opportunities for other grants, such as electric vehicles, and we have done that before, we partner with even the city of Tucson and other partners to pursue those grants, but these grants were not specific to electric vehicles.
Are we, should I request, Mr. Chair, an item to talk about electric vehicle readiness for both PAG and RTA? I think that it's important that we have this conversation.
Mayor, I agree with you.
If we don't have a plan, we should put one together.
It's a conversation I think is definitely worth having, and I'd go back to the executive director. The question I have for you, would that kind of policy be something that would stem from a PAG action, which is then applicable to the RTA? Because we do not mirror every policy, I mean, that PAG has. So I'm just wondering where, if we were to add an agenda item, would that occur at a PAG meeting, or would that be an RTA meeting?
I would say, because we're talking RTA funds and RTA's authority to provide transit, it would be under RTA.
So I understand that specifically for this agenda item and this grant.
Correct.
In general, when we're making policies about the directions we're going with reduction to carbon reduction or to, is that appropriate, more appropriate? I'm just trying to find out where an agenda item.
I think RTA is, because again, RTA has the authority to purchase, ag does not purchase vehicles, doesn't own vehicles.
So Marilyn, I would think if you're then going to make a request, it would be for an RTA agenda in the future.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So any further discussion? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we're going to skip past agenda item 5 because I'd like to get some of the speakers, starting with Rick Ellis on the RTA Road Improvement Project, item 6, the improvement element, project number 18 at Grant Road. And Mr. Ellis, could you begin it?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Materials in the packet, that's also been provided to you as a follow-up to the discussion approximately a month ago at the last meeting regarding Grant Road. And I've got a slide up there to go with it. Apologize for how this looks. This was the simplified version we came up with that tries to describe all this. The spreadsheet is also part of your packet that shows all the details of the committed funds. That's there for your information. We can answer any questions on that. But this has been kind of the heart and soul of the discussion that we wanted to share and describe to all of you in a little bit better phrasing than what we tried to share last time. And essentially, this is the hierarchy or the allocation that we're dealing with and how we are addressing the funding, but also the funding request for additional funds that have to come in or that we know are coming in. So what we're looking at is, if you look at the left-hand side, you're going to see a priority bar that goes from the top to the bottom. And that's kind of looking at this saying, okay, our top priority allocation are going to go to those construction projects, either in construction, of which there's a couple, or the ones that are pending with construction ready. They're coming up, they're in various stages of either just recently starting, or they're going to be pending advertisement or a construction start with the particular delivery method they're using on that. So those projects are listed there. We're already been aware in our close working relationship with the various project teams and jurisdictions that there may be potential requests for some of those already. So in order for us to be responsive and to be able to provide that, we have to make sure we've got that funding available, that we can be able to help those go forward. Why are the construction ready so prioritized? That's the comments we get from the public, the businesses, from the jurisdictions, project teams. When are you going to construction? When is construction going to start? When are we going to get underway and start seeing construction? So it's a regular request that everybody is always aware of and always making, that we want to be particularly sensitive to. The second component, or the second hierarchy, if you will, or tier in there that we look at, is what we refer to as the compliance projects. And these are the 7 projects that are identified there that essentially have had no activity or construction related and must start construction efforts by June 30, 2026 to be compliant. Now, these are all in various stages of activity level. Some well in their design, one of them is actually pending advertisement. So they're all at various stages of progress through there. But because these are the unique standalone projects, they still have to comply with that requirement. We must hit that as a legal responsibility in compliance with the legislation. 3 of those projects have fixed contribution amounts that were identified in the 2006 ballot, but 4 others are susceptible to the cost increases, the dynamic markets. We're working with the teams closely to make sure we try to account for that so that we're not caught off. But we also have to be responsive to if there are things outside of our control that we have to respond to. So that's your second tier, the ones that have to meet legal obligation. Then that leaves the bottom ones. They're not the lowest priority. Their just status happens to be more conducive to going third in line behind the other 2. And so those are the ones where we have greater flexibility, where we can adjust. We've already met the compliance requirements. We've put significant portions out there and segments have already been constructed or built. So that's how you kind of see where that goes. So when I was describing that a month ago and saying, well, we do these priorities, and I have a lot of hand waving going with it. This diagram reflects kind of what we're living with, how we're doing this, and how we're describing this to the public in the various meetings we've been talking with them on. I know that's a lot. I hope this makes some sense. Farhad, if there's anything you can think of that you want to add, if not, I'd be willing to entertain any questions at this time.
Mr. Chair.
Just a quick question, because we have the statutory requirement to, get all these projects started. And it really doesn't matter what municipality they fall in. If we don't get them started, it's not the municipality that fails, it's RTA council that fails. Is that correct?
That's correct. Is that it's a reflection on the RTA as an entity, not the individual jurisdiction.
Right, thanks.
I have a question.
No, no.
Who made this funding priority decision that you presented to us?
I don't know that there's been a formal decision. I'd have to go back to the notes, past meetings, everything else, but I think it's reflective of the comments and the, I guess, emphasis that we hear time and time again about getting construction going, getting the projects out there. We hear from the public, we hear from the businesses.
Heard, but who made this decision?
Who made it?
Who made the decision of the graph that you have here for us?
I'm not
The
sure.
decision in terms of how we provide funding for the projects.
I'm not sure I can point to any one person or entity that was responsible for this.
Would the RTA board help make the decisions in terms of how funding is prioritized?
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, again, the effort is a collective effort. We've been working with the TPC to identify funding for all projects. So what you see is very much aligned with the recommendation that the TPC came back with, and actually management committee even adopted that this morning. Those 7 projects must start construction before July 1. The draft tip that's recommended fully funds those projects to start before July 21. And again, the point we're raising here is that we even anticipate those projects may need additional supplemental funds. The remaining 4 projects on the bottom, again, the draft tip that was adopted today by management committee and recommended by TPC reflects that those projects may need supplemental funds, but that's up to this board to make that decision when and how to fund those projects. So this is, like Rick said, it's combination of almost a year and a half of discussions with all the committees and the public, and that's reflected on the map that you see, or the diagram that you see.
And to add, that's part of the reason we have the executive session on the scheduled day, so we can get further legal advice and interpretation on where this funding priority may fall. And obviously, I think to your point, this funding specifically in this order was not ever brought forward to the board, or at least not the time I've been here yet, to say this is how we're going to do it. So that's why it's important that we have the discussion in executive session with the lawyer to get the legal guidance and advice that we might need should we decide to make decisions not in alignment with what right now is out there.
Mr. Chair, but overall, all of the things that we deal with doesn't that fall under the tip that we talk about and approve from a year to year basis? I mean, all these things, none of these are new projects, right? They've been all incorporated under the RTA plan since 2006. At least that would be my understanding.
Again, Mr. Chair, Mayor Murphy, as I mentioned, we've been working on this for a year and a half, so everyone's been involved in the conversation, but it's been mainly within the context of developing the tip, yes.
I think it's important to remember, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, because I'm going to give you the 5-year plan from ADOT's perspective, is those are 5-year plans that we approve annually or or every other year, depending what document it is. And so they change continuously, and there is movement in that. But those decisions, you're right, are made from this board.
Right. That was what I was trying to touch on.
Mr. Chair, can I direct everybody's attention to the item on our spreadsheet dealing with roadway safety and environmental and economic vitality elements, because there's close to 200 million RTA TPT funds that are committed, but through Q3, less than 6 million has been spent, which would leave over $193 million either to be spent in the remaining 3 months of this year or roll over to fiscal year 25. So just wanted to point that out as something that I noticed when I was looking at this spreadsheet. And another point I wanted to point out is that with regard to some of the projects that Mr. Ellis referred to at the top of the spreadsheet, it looks like some of those projects won't spend all the amount budgeted for them this fiscal year, which would mean that we could go back to what the executive director and Mayor Murphy said about the tip. There could be a tip amendment that accelerated phase 5, 6 funding for the Grant Road project and push back some of the existing construction funding for a different project to a later year. The other thing I wanted to point out, and I think Mayor Romero mentioned this in a previous meeting, is that it is certainly true, as it's said in our supporting materials, that phases 5 and 6 of the grant are not construction ready, but no project is going to be construction ready if right of way is not acquired and utilities relocated. So I hope those are all factors that we're taking into consideration as we're looking at item 6. And I appreciated getting these materials in our packets so that we could review them prior to this discussion. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if I got into any areas that we were going to be talking about in exec. If we did, I apologize.
Mr. Chair?
Well, if you did, it might be more than an apology, but I think.
Mr. Chair, can I request that we have Sam Credo present as well, so that we can present the background?
Absolutely, Mayor, that's,
This
I
item.
do think to Supervisor Scott point one, if you take a look at some of those, a lot of those funds above the line, they're committed to these projects that we've got in front of us right now. You know, Valencia, it's 22nd. So, and that is again why we need to have a discussion on what we can do with committed funds versus expended funds going forward. So just before I let Rick go, anybody else have any questions specifically for Mr. Ellis? And the last thing we're going to do is, because I know, thank you, appreciate it. I'm going to ask Sam Credo to come up and talk about their current Grant Road 5 and 6 situation, to kind of, so that we kind of understand. After that, I'd like everybody to hold any questions they have for him, because I'd request we go into executive session while we've still got Mayor Honey here, so we can talk about the legal implications and why we see things in order we see them today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor, members of the board. I just really briefly want to tell you kind of the path we've been on for Grant Road 5 and 6 and how we got to where we're at today. Beginning back in January of 2023, we were having discussions amongst the design team as well as with the RTA about the need to move forward with right-of-way acquisition for Grant 5 and 6. At that time, we were approaching 90% plans, and the time was right to begin that conversation. At that time, the discussion was moving forward with a $25 million IGA to begin right-of-way acquisition. To be clear, that's not enough for all of the right-of-way acquisition on Grant 5 and 6. In fact, the number is more like $50 to $60 million, but that was enough to get the right-of-way acquisition started and progress down the path as we finalize the 90% plans. Back in January of 2023, the idea was to bring that IGA to the RTA board in March of 2023. Talking with staff, it looks like there were some staff level conversations about whether or not it made sense to move forward with an IGA for a partial amount of the right of way or the entire amount for the right of way. So we have to avoid going back for right of way, IGA amendments. At that time, the conversations kind of broke down, and it was, we'll get back to you. In April of 2023, I made a formal request to initiate the IGA for right of way acquisition. And at that time, the RTA staff let me know that those on the board's direction, dollars were only being prioritized for construction-ready projects. Again, thank you Supervisor Scott for acknowledging those comments because you're right. This project will never, ever be ready for construction if we don't move forward on this significant right-of-way effort. And so the 90% plans have been submitted since that time. And we are essentially at a standstill on the project while we can finalize the plans to their entirety. Really, the critical path right now is the right-of-way acquisition on Grant 5-6. And I'd be happy to answer questions if you'd like to entertain any now or after you come back from executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. I always learn you never really say something if you think you might actually have a question that you're dying to ask. So I do have a follow-up. So you said originally you were thinking of 25 million IGA, but then you said in April 23, you came back with a formal IGA request. How much was that for the full right-of-way amount, or was that for the 25 million?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And it was actually in August of 2023. We made a formal request, and I don't know that we spoke specifics of the dollar amount, but ideally we would like to request the entire $50 million so we can move forward on the entire right-of-way acquisition process. Now, with that being said, we know that we're not going to spend $50 million on day one in right-of-way acquisition. There are appraisals that are going to have to be obtained. We have to work with the property owners on relocation, cure plan. There's a lot of work that has to occur. So even a partial request for the right-of-way acquisition dollars would at least allow us to move forward on the project.
Trying to keep you from having to stand around. How much realistically and what time frame do you think you could expend any right-of-way dollars?
So we can expend a decent amount of right-of-way dollars almost immediately. We have to order somewhere in the magnitude of 100 to 120 appraisals. Those appraisals cost in the range of $3,000 to $5,000 each. So that's in the rough order of magnitude of $300,000 to $500,000 that we could expend very quickly. In talking with our real estate team, we definitely anywhere between 10 and $25 million would at least get us a really good jump start on many of the most challenging right-of-way acquisitions along this corridor.
And I would take it from that request and those comments, there's no funding right now available within the city of Tucson's budget for any of even the studies or the appraisals.
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, since I opened the floor for myself, I'm going to keep it open if anybody has any questions for Mr. Credio.
Mr. Chair, just not being an engineer, to complete the design, is the reason you can't get to final design is because you can't potentially acquire right away, so you'd have to design it differently, because the expectation would be you would get all the right away you needed, right, to complete the project. I'm just not an engineer, so I'm just trying to figure out why it can't be designed, knowing that you're going for the right away.
Mr. Chair, Mayor Murphy, thank you for that question. So with design being at 90%, we know by and large the right-of-way impacts that we're going to have. And we certainly could finalize those plans, button them up. We wouldn't be able to move forward with construction until the right-of-way is acquired. But I also want to point out that as we begin the negotiations with these property owners and some of these cure plans, there might be opportunities to tweak to design to hopefully maybe minimize the impact to the property owner or minimize the amount of cure that we have to do for that property owner. So the timing is right in that we still have the design ongoing. And as we're having those very dynamic and fluid conversations with the property owners, we can make changes on the fly. However, finalizing the plans would not, preclude us from still going out and buying right away afterwards. It's just, it's going to take longer for us to deliver the project that way.
Honey.
You had talked about if you got the money, you could buy, you need 50 million and you could spend 10 in purchases of right of way pretty quickly. How long would it take you to purchase all of the right of way?
So
Estimated.
yeah, Mr. Chair, Mayor Honey, thank you for that question. We estimate that the entire right-of-way acquisition process on Grant Road is likely at least 2 years. All of the right-of-way, all the cure plans and all the relocations.
And I guess just from sorry, Mr. Chairman, from a budgetary standpoint, the city has a big budget, right? There's no money appropriated for this particular one, but there could be choices made, just like we're asked to potentially make here, to do things, hold other things back, and maybe make some of that money available earlier. Could it not?
Mr. Chair, Mayor Murphy, that would not be a decision that I can make. We do have a budget, and we do have priorities, and within the confines of our current budget, there is not availability to purchase right away for grant 5.6.
Thanks.
Arabelle.
Thank you, Sam, for the presentation. I really appreciate it. And you said that in January, you had a design meeting and a member of the RTA, I think it was Rick Ellis, was at that meeting, and that the acquisition conversation was had, and that Mr. Ellis actually agreed that acquisition was to be part of moving forward with grant 5.6.
Mr. Chair, Mayor Murphy, Mayor Romero, that is correct. The conversation at that time was we were going to advance an IGA for right-of-way acquisition in the amount of $25 million.
What was the reasoning for the change? You said that was in January 23, and then maybe in March of 23, the story changed. What was the reason?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, we started having conversations with staff about would it make sense to ask for the partial amount for the right-of-way acquisition or the entire amount to avoid having to do, multiple IGA amendments. And then at that time, conversations just broke down. It really wasn't a very specific, as I understand it, specific reasoning. And what I want to lean on is just the more formal request that I made back in August. And the reasoning at that time is that based on the RTA board's decisions, that we are only prioritizing construction-ready projects and projects that had not begun a prior phase. And since Grant 5.6 does not check either of those boxes, it was not considered as a priority for funding, especially for right-of-way acquisition.
And just one additional question. This RTA project statutory delivery priorities, this that you have in front of us.
Mayor,
Have you, may I finish?
yes, ma'am.
Have you, through the technical management committee, or what was the other committee that you sit on?
TPC, Transportation Planning Committee.
Have you seen this priority list, and have the PMC and TPC given advice to use this priority?
Mr. Chair, Mayor Romero, we have not seen this slide until it was included in the RTA board packet. And no, we have not had an opportunity on either of those committees to provide specific guidance and suggestions on priorities for projects.
All righty. And this question is for Mayor Murphy. Mayor Murphy, you're suggesting for the city of Tucson to advance money from our general fund to purchase right away for an RTA project?
Just when it comes to budget priorities, we have multiple budget priorities that I think we're gonna have a discussion on from RTA, just like towns and cities have budget priorities. So, when we hear there's no money available, we've heard we have no money available for grant 5 and 6 currently. So I think it's.
So you're suggesting that the city of Tucson tap into our general fund to pay for an RTA project?
Well, if the timing may not satisfy the city, that is one, I think that's one alternative, as opposed to not potentially making our statutory requirements on some of the others, because all entities have limitations on funding, whether it be towns or cities or RTA, and it's a matter of prioritization.
Well, that's a little bit ridiculous to suggest. We did hear, thanks to Supervisor Scott, there is available funds from the RTA. It's just a matter of this board prioritizing construction of a regionally significant corridor. So, I mean, I know that you want to continue conversation in executive, but I do have questions about the reasoning as to why we go into executive. But I just wanted to clarify your statement.
Thank you. Well, I understand, Mayor, I apologize for cutting you short. I thought you were going to ask for an opinion from Sam regarding the compliance requirement, which is what we're going into executive talk about the legalities of it. So I did.
No, I
Almost a good
wanted
question,
to
Simon. I thought you-
establish,
I thought you would
because
know
it's
something else.
our board, the technical management committee and what was that other transportation
Planning committee.
planning committee. And I just wanted to make sure that for the record, he stated that he had not seen this priority funding graph.
Absolutely. Mayor Honey, then Supervisor Scott.
Another
Question
question.
of asked a question.
2 years to purchase right away. Well, 2 years from today is May of 2026. And the RTA 1 ends in June of 2026. Just timing alone, we're running up against the wall. And on some of these things, and I have a question about that. What happens if we run out of time? Now, there's a lot of projects Maryland that aren't getting done, including one of ours, because we either can't get the money or can't get the planning or something. We're gonna run up against a wall. And what really bothers me is I see a bunch of PAG money leaking into the RTA to finish these projects somewhere down the road. And I got a big issue with that. And, I think we need to get some timings down here. I'm not saying one way or another, but if we can't buy the right of way within 2 years, you're not going to finish the road within 3 years. And that's going to be in 2027, long past this current RTA taxing ability. And what kind of monies do we have?
Mayor Honey, that's a very valid point. I would say to remind the board that when we made the decision to defer 4 projects, we also made the commitment to finish all of RTA 1's projects. And that is, to your point, if either RTA Next doesn't get put in place or other issues, we're going to be working on completing our RTA 1 projects due to the shortfall on funding well into the future. So it's a valid point, but I just want to make sure nobody hears that RTA in July of 26, all the RTA 1 projects are going to stop, because that's not the commitment this board had made within the last 12 to 18 months.
Okay. Add a little to my question.
Absolutely.
Okay, and RTA, we RTA committed. RTA and PAG are 2 different entities, same board, different things. Can the RTA commit PAG to spending PAG money to finish RTA projects, or have we done that?
Mr. Chair, if I may, please, Mayor Honey, if I understand the question correctly, the answer is no. PAG Regional Council, through the TIP development process, commits funds. So that's completely within the purview of the Regional Council.
Thank you.
Supervisor Scott.
I think my question is probably better asked in exec.
Yep. At this time, I'm going to. Thank you. Oh,
Just one, I have one with Mr. Ellis. Can you come back to the?
absolutely. Mr. Ellis.
Clarify, there's several projects listed under construction pending. What exactly does construction pending mean, Mr. Ellis?
Construction pending, the way we categorized it on this diagram was to show that they're at that final step where they need just the remaining clearances, or they're in the process of advertising. So we know construction's forthcoming. They've just got the last couple of steps before they cross the finish line. So in the instance of, say, Tangerine, they're processing the finalized guaranteed maximum price documents to allow the contractor to get going. In the case of Valencia, that's going to be a project that they're going to be looking to advertise here in the upcoming weeks. They're same with Silver Bell or some of those projects. So it's right around the corner. They're doing the last of the completion of the approvals before they can advertise.
So the projects in that last category, First Avenue, Grant to River, Grants 5 and 6, those have met the statutory requirements. Is that my understanding?
That's correct.
The projects that are listed under construction pending, they have not met the statutory requirements.
No, those have also met statutory requirements, but they're at the finish line, ready to go into that next phase of construction. So they're essentially ready to deliver the improvements onto the street.
So they've met statutory requirements, but some of those projects have not gone to bid.
Correct.
Thanks.
Any further questions? All right, at this time, I'm going to close item 6 temporarily until we come out of executive session. At this time, we will adjourn to. Do we?
Mr. Chair, before we adjourn, just have a couple of questions about executive session and the reasoning to go into executive.
Do you think you want to ask those before we go into executive session?
I do, because it has to do with the reasoning behind executive session.
Well, how about for that discussion? Can we make a motion to go into executive session, see if it's seconded?
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking for a motion in a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you.
Open it for
All right,
discussion.
any discussion?
Yes, in conversations with our city attorney, Mike Rankin, he has questioned, and I'm not sure, this is his exact language, I'm not sure how discussion about the expenditure caps fits under the executive session noticed in item 5. The title of that executive session, compliance with RTA intergovernmental agreements and project delivery schedule. The description then says executive session is to discuss statutory schedule compliance and use of supplemental funding. I don't know, he says why we couldn't have this conversation in public. I just want to clarify, maybe Mr. Mogini or Mr. Benavides can help clarify what exactly is the legality of why we needed to go into executive session. Because there are, under state law, there are certain reasons why boards or councils can go into executive session. Can you describe exactly why we're going into executive session and not have to have these conversations in public? Can I hear from the attorney first, please? Can I hear from the attorney first?
If I may.
Yeah.
Mayor Romero, members of the board. From my perspective and what I've done, my understanding is that there are questions about the board's rights and responsibilities with respect to its obligations under the plan and its obligations under its intergovernmental agreements. So that's all I can talk about. This is listed for, legal advisor to ask questions of the attorney. It's not for you to have a conversation and closed doors that you don't want to have in public. So I wouldn't allow that. And I know that you don't want to do that, but I mean, it can only be for, in other words, to ask your attorney questions or for your attorney to give you his or her opinion about these matters that are listed here. Any public body can get legal advice about anything on their agenda, as long as it's a legitimate, exchange with the attorney to ask questions about your rights and responsibilities. So it could be, you could go into legal advice for anything on the agenda. So it's not, you're not restricted, but you are restricted for that purpose. And it's right, the legislature very narrowly restricts the times that you can go into executive session. And that's what we all have a responsibility to adhere to.
I'm just concerned that the conversation in executive session would be so extensive that we can't have any conversations outside of executive session regarding if there's concerns with intergovernmental agreements or any other pieces of the Grant 5-6 conversation we're trying to have.
I appreciate your concern. I've already got my plan for opening the executive session, which will specifically say we're not going to talk about any specific projects to include Grant 5-6. We're not going to go into to big detail on specific projects, but I do believe there is a lot of confusion. Mm-hmm. And if I'm aware of some of Attorney Rankin's opinions, I think we need to get clarifications on those, because how he interpreted is absolutely not how I interpret it. And I don't want to have those disagreements necessarily in public when we've got an attorney on our board to clarify. We will absolutely continue this conversation when we get back out here regarding specifically the grant 5 and 6 project. But on the legal advice we get regarding risk and other issues, that needs to happen in executive session. So,
All right, I just wanted to make clear
All right.
our capacity to discuss the project and its details in front of the public.
I've already talked with the attorney about, we're not going to be talking project specific issues with regards. We're going to talk about, there will be more conversation how the statutes that we need to get clarification on and how they apply will then apply to the conversation that's going to occur afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarity.
You're welcome. All right. Do we have any other concerns or discussion on agenda to go into executive session? You have a motion in a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Aye. with this. At this time, I'd be looking for a motion to come out of executive session in a second. All right, any discussion? All those in favor of coming out of executive session? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? All right, we are out of executive session.
You may want to note that Mayor Diaz is.
Yes, I'm gonna make note, both Mayor Diaz and Mayor Honey have left us. We still have a quorum. Okay, razor thin margin on that quorum. Is there any action to be taken coming out of executive session?
I'll make a motion to direct staff as discussed in executive session.
We have a second? Got a second from the motion from Mayor Murphy, second from Supervisor Scott. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Let that be noted. I'm going to reopen item 6. Discussion on Grant Road. Anybody have any questions for any of our speakers or any further comments regarding that issue?
First, I just want to reiterate that Grant Road is one of the most regionally significant corridors in the RTA plan for the city of Tucson. The plan should be given priority to be completed. We will not be able to move forward and proceed if right-of-way acquisition doesn't happen. And so what I continue thinking about is how can we ask voters to approve a plan for another 20+ years of sales taxes when there's a glaring gap along Grant Road, one of the most heavily traveled corridors in our region. The argument that we've satisfied the construction start date through work on other phases of the Grant Road corridor is disingenuous. For the city of Tucson, both Grant Road and First Avenue are regionally significant and need to be supported by our colleagues in the RTA. One other thing that I do want to note is that the delays caused by RTA staff are costing us more money. Because the more we wait, the more right-of-way acquisition will cost, the more construction phases will cost. And so I would like to ask that we ask our executive director to come back at our next May meeting with a plan to proceed and move forward with the project.
Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion. I've got a clarifying question. Is that specific to the ROA, the right-of-way acquisition?
That's where we need to move forward.
That's what you said.
We are at 90%. I think we're at 90%, correct me if I'm wrong, some 90% design. The next steps are right-of-way acquisition and then construction.
Okay, so by definition, it would predominantly deal with right-of-way. Okay. Any questions? Further discussion amongst the members? I've got a motion and a second to provide guidance to the executive director to try to chart a path forward for Grant Road. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Aye. Let the record be shown. All right, we're going to move on to RTA next. We've already exceeded the time limit. What we've got, we've probably got another 30 minutes or so that I think we can talk with razor thin quorum. We're not going to try to take any direct action or movement. But we do have a meeting coming up at the end of May where we may have some more details on a plan. What I'd like to do to start this segment is we all have in front of us, and Executive Director, correct me if I'm wrong, we have both the current plans as they sit, and there's also a plan that a modification of the plan that was put forward through work predominantly, but not exclusively, with the staffs from the town of Sarita and Pima County to make some more modifications. Everybody should have that. I know nobody's had much time to look at it deeply. But one thing that I noted with my initial review of it was that it had a lot of language at the bottom of the plan that really is good for future discussion. It talks quite heavily. We heard during one of the members of the call, the audience talked about the use of the baseline and why we as a board have stuck to the idea that the pessimistic is going to be our initial baseline. We've started to have discussions regarding what if it comes in above pessimistic? How can we use those funds to satisfy the needs and the requirements of our communities and our region? So I'm going to ask at this time, Beth Abramovich with the city or with the town of Sarita. Keep trying to make you a city.
That's
Mayor,
okay.
sorry.
That's all right.
And Carmen DeBonis with Pima County. If they could, I'd like you to come up and kind of explain and talk through what went through the conversations you had and why you see this as a proposal that is getting us closer to coming up with a plan for the region.
Chair, while they're walking up, I just wanted to pass on my appreciation for county staff and town and all of the municipalities that keep trying to do the heavy lifting to try to go up with something next.
And if you haven't found it yet amongst all the paperwork, it's the big long one with a lot of yellow on it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the RTA board. Carmine DeBonis, Pima County. Just a little closer. Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. Happy to be here and give you just some background on the conversations that have been happening. So much like you all, the staff in the various jurisdictions have been looking at different ways to move a plan forward that can receive unanimous support by this body and move on for input from the residents of the entire county for feedback. So Pima County has been working with our representative Supervisor Scott. He has challenged the staff, Ms. Lesher, myself, Catherine Skinner, our Director for Department of Transportation, to take the feedback that we've heard at these various meetings and other committee meetings and come up with options for potentially getting closer to a plan that could receive unanimous support. So we've been doing that with Supervisor Scott and also talking with the various staff at the different jurisdictions. And so clearly, I think you all know where things stand, right? It's either reduce expenses in the plan or reallocate the dollars that are available. And I know that you all have had robust conversations about that and expect that that's going to continue. So this is by no means an attempt for us to, take you off task with that, but hopefully to bring forward some ideas that you can continue to discuss and maybe formulate some path forward to getting to a place where everybody is comfortable. Noting the comments that took place at the last meeting after the city had indicated a preference for a greater percentage of the allocation of funds, we looked at how to potentially increase that allocation or that share to the city of Tucson. And so from Pima County's perspective, we looked at can we make adjustments to the projects in the plan or the funding allocation, RTA funding allocation that goes to the plan, goes to those projects. We also took a look at some of the funds like the safety and active transportation dollars that were not specified to go to specific projects, but was that bucket of unallocated dollars in there, and could that be distributed a little differently to get closer to some of the desired allocation split or percentage split for the jurisdictions. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion by this body about the amounts for contingency and for debt service. At a prior point, the county had suggested maybe taking a look at use of a small portion of regional funds to help round out the pie, so to speak, to get more of the projects that are desired into the plan. And so we really looked at a combination of different ways to do that. And so we had put forth an idea saying take a little bit more out of the unallocated portion of safety and transportation and go ahead and assign that to the city. Looked at taking a little piece of contingency, a little piece of debt service, and, you know, figured out a way to get to roughly 55% between was allocated in plan. And then also the concept that you've heard before about any dollars over the pessimistic forecast being allocated or a right of first refusal given to the city of Tucson for up to 300 million. So we met with city staff. We were able to meet with Mr. Ortega and Ms. Morales and Mr. Credio and talk about that idea. We also shared the concept, the framework of what we were working on with other jurisdictions, Marana and Sahuarita. And so we had conversation with those each informally, trying to see what people's reaction was. And so following the conversations, that's where the town of Sahuarita came forward and brought the idea that is in front of you today, the materials that you have in front of you today. So the county did have discussions, met with Ms. Abramovitz, our county administrator, speaking with Manager Dilly to try and see if things are reasonable in terms of an approach to it. So I'm going to go ahead and leave my comments there and maybe turn over to Ms. Abramovitz to give a summary of the details on what's before you today, but I will stick close by here and be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for allowing us to talk about this more. So you have in front of you a revised spreadsheet. So I'm just going to walk you kind of quickly through the changes to this plan from the last plan that came to you. A lot of it is the same. We tried to keep that same framework, keep what you were used to seeing. So there wasn't an entirely new plan thrown at you. So the main differences in what you're seeing in front of you is on column K of that spreadsheet, there's an allocation to the city for dollars for 3 projects. These are projects that aren't sponsored by the city, but a portion of the project would be built in the city, such as the SR 210 project or the Sonoran Corridor project. Also, based on those revised projections, the overall RTA next budget, we changed the safety and active transit element to have about $228.5 million of total availability. And at the last TNC meeting, everybody intended to agree that, all things considered, that about 50% of those dollars would go to the city. So because that was an item that we all seemed that we could agree on, and we had also agreed that South Tucson, that they had their allocation out of that bucket and that there was one project for Pima County. We allocated those dollars out of that bucket using 25 million, which is a change for South Tucson, but that's something that South Tucson had agreed upon that they were amenable to in at least 2 other meetings. And so we subtracted the Pima County 5.8 million for their project. And of those remaining funds, 50% of that was allocated to the city of Tucson. The environmental element remains unchanged, half of which has been allocated to the city of Tucson. The 610 million for transit remains unchanged. Lines 113 to 118 represent the 510 million that was agreed upon as the amount needed to leave transit unharmed with no reduction in services. And then on the former the town of Sahuarita plan, there had been one line item that was for $100 million, but we've broken that into its 2 component parts. One is the $70 million for matching funds for the city's rapid transit project and 30 million for future service expansions or enhancements. So of that 30 million, we've allocated 15 million to the city. Administrative services have been revised to reflect the funds needed due to the increase in the overall budget. Debt service, to Carmine's point, was shown at 67 million. This is a decrease from the 77 million that was discussed at the last meeting. And over the overlap funding and economic contingency funding were left at the 40 million and 100 million respectively. So taking all those things into account, and then subtracting out all the funds that kind of aren't available for projects, things like the deferred projects, debt service, the administrative costs, the small business program, and all overlap and contingency dollars, that leaves just over $1.98 billion of funds for projects and or transit. And the city, based on those changes, would be getting 930 million of that, or 46.8%. So we also have been talking about anything over that pessimistic amount. As you heard earlier today from Ms. Rice from ACEC, there's other entities that believe that maybe we shouldn't be looking at that pessimistic. And the CAC has asked the question, how do we allocate those funds that come in above that pessimistic number? So rather than looking at pessimistic to baseline and which baseline, we just mapped it out and said for the city to get the desired 55% of the total, that the first $360 million of funds over the pessimistic projections would be made available to the city, that they would essentially have the right of first refusal. Chairman Maxwell talked about some of the language in the spreadsheet, which could be discussed later about possible ways to allocate those additional funds. And again, the city would have the right of first refusal for funds, the 360 million, until they have 360 million that has been made available to them. So those are the main changes to that are in front of me.
Thank you. And then if you can both come up with this, I've got some questions right off the top, because I know one of the concerns when I first saw this, it's yeoman's work, and appreciate you still carrying it. And I hope that's an example to everybody. We're going to have our staff continue to do this, as well as, it's obviously a concern for us as members of the board. We got to make sure that we're not fighting any open meeting laws, but that doesn't prevent, one or two of us having conversations throughout the time. We just have to be very cautious that we're not duplicating. But I do encourage the staffs to stay engaged. So some of the questions, first thing that jumped out at me is the 46.8 at the city of Tucson. I know is going to be below what they're targeting, what they're looking for. Was there given any consideration to reducing the contingency money from like 100 to 50, with the first 50,000 of excess funds over the pessimistic replenishing the contingency? So in other words, you'd still have 100,000 over the life of the project, and then allocating those 50,000 or some segment of that to the city to try to bring that 46% up. Was that discussed at all? And yes, that's an idea I had, so I just want to see if you talk about it.
So thank you, Chair and mayors. In the conversations that the city had, the county had with the city, we did look at reducing portions of contingency in order to round out, and the county in its proposed approach, I think, was at 48.3% allocated the city in plan, within 300 million, that amount above pessimistic going to the city, right? The first 300 million to get to 55%. And in the conversations with City Manager Ortega and Assistant City Manager Morales and Director Credio, that concept of allocating or reallocating funds out of contingency, with the idea of it being replenished along the way as planned revenues were realized, did come up. And so that has been a point raised, but there was not a final structure placed on that, other than a conversation around the concept.
Well, I do think that's something that we as the board, or in the future conversations, I'd encourage people to look at are some of those fixed costs, like the contingency one. I'm hoping we're not going to spend all 100,000 of our contingent, or 100 million of our contingency in the first year. So is there an appropriate time that we could replenish it and yet get some more guarantees to the city and others projects along the way? I've tried to work with the numbers on percentages as well. Is there any reason Well, first off, is there any money for the environmental element in there? Because I'm assuming it's just not showing, you still show a 50 million at the end. And if so, is there a reason you didn't just move that down into the general funds as well, which reduces the denominator and kind of brings the percentages up, because those wildlife funds can go anywhere in the region. So it really, to allocate them to anybody or to the total is probably not necessary either.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for the question. The 50 billion is still in the plan, but similar to the other categorical for the safety element, where it was anticipated that the city would likely, all things considered, have 50% of that. 50% of that was assigned to it was allocated to the city of Tucson.
Okay. All right. So you did do an assignment there, 50%, then everything else not city. I noticed one of the comments you put to the side is total of the categoricals for the city of Tucson. In that safety and active transportation element, you suggested perhaps it should just be listed as city of Tucson, so it doesn't lock them into anything. Did you talk about possibly doing that with all the projects, making those for the city of Tucson? They've got their South Tucson has projects in there. I know you took those out. But same thing with the other municipalities, to just identify what the money that's in there and leave it up to municipalities to define those throughout the course of the RTA period.
So, Mr. Chair, Pima County and the city were really the only two jurisdictions that expressed interest in naming their categorical projects. It was a discussion amongst the TMC, and certain jurisdictions said if pressed and we had to name them, we could name some, but we preferred to keep the flexibility of naming them at a future point. The way the plan in front of you would work now, there's approximately $99 million that would be available to the city. And if they wanted to name $99 million worth of the projects, I don't believe any of the other jurisdictions would have issue with that. The Pima County project would be named. There would be a $25 million earmark for South Tucson to be named later. And then that other 99 million would be available to the other jurisdictions. But on that note, just also for consideration, is that using the same process that all the other jurisdictions go through when there's funding available, that remaining $98 million, the city would still have that opportunity as members of the TPC and TMC when funds are available to request funds if they had already spent their 98 million and needed additional funds.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the board have any questions, comments regarding this? Of either Beth or Carmine?
They've heard enough from me, so.
Mayor.
Well, it's the first time I see the list.
Yes.
And would really like an opportunity to study what it has. But I mean, I have a lot of thoughts, as you all well know, but I think that it seems to me like we're going back more in terms of the remaining percentages that the city of Tucson, the 4.2 flat plan, or the previous conversation, we had gotten to like 47%. Now it's 46.8%. So it's getting less and less. And I understand and appreciate the movement of the TMC members that are working with each other and presenting as this in terms of after the pessimistic, if there's additional money that comes in, that the city of Tucson would have the right of first refusal to get us to 55%. So I appreciate that. But the city of Tucson is taking all the risk. And so I think we're really close. I still need to look at the numbers, still need to talk to the city manager, but I'll tell you, I don't believe that Tucsonans will think it's a good deal to start with 46%. So I think that I'm going back to what your comment was, that can we show the pain here? Can we show the risk here? when it comes to getting us to a better percentage so that we can tell the voters we're here and then we're going to share the risk with others, namely the contingency fund. And we can get to 55% at the end of the life of the RTA next. That would be my my input into all of this. So I agree with you, Ted, that we need to make sure that we get to a better place at the beginning and share the risk above the pessimistic perspective as we move forward.
And Mayor, I fully agree with you. Appreciate the comments. One of the many things I appreciated about this effort was the fact that you did, we were hung up at the last meeting. There was some concern about everybody having part of that above the pessimistic view, and the program you brought forward said, no, we'll put it all in the city. Now I think it's finding the sweet spot between what you outlined and what the city will find acceptable. And I do think I'm going to throw out a couple ideas because we had a meeting that Supervisor Scott was able to attend the other day at SLC where we brought the folks from MAG down. And there's some things that they do differently than we do. And I'm not saying we want to be MAG, we want to be PAG. There's things, but there's some things that we haven't talked about much, even some savings where we can maybe move some money out or move it into a different phase. Some of those are in the transit element. I know the transit element's a very sensitive topic, so I don't want to overstep it. But one thing MAG doesn't have is they don't do the municipal circulator. They just don't have them in there. It's all the ones that are traveling throughout and not ones that are just done very specifically. So I think there's some conversation we could have because that's a $76 million input, which we could put towards other regional wide transit systems but that means each one of the municipalities that are outside of the city would be playing in, and we may be able to transfer some money in there. And to the new services where that fits. So I think we could probably talk about the current allocation. I appreciated Sam Credio. He took a call from me this morning. We discussed how he had used his transit numbers and calculated what the city's benefit from it was versus the regionality of it as well. And they're, right now they're taking almost 2/3 on that. I think we may be able to, depending what we allocate it for, whether it's new services, more frequency, we may be able to find some play to increase some of the city's movement up front there as well. But I do think the contingency funding may be something that we can look at again, what I stated was put some in for that first quarter. And again, we got to decide, this is where I love the stuff you've written on the side about it, is we have to determine how we're going to determine when we take the snapshot of what exceeds the pessimistic view. It's going to be every 2 years, every 3 years, every 5 years. We've got to come up with that. But at that time, we could also allocate some of that money right back into the contingency, up front. And that way we may be able to move some of the risk because it's a big jump. And I'm incredibly impressed that got the city up to 55%. That was a number the mayor talked, and they figured it now. I think both the board and I want the staff to continue the conversations, hopefully too, on areas. And Mayor Murphy, Mayor Winfield, Supervisor Scott, any areas that you see where, again, we're not going to solve it today, but that you think we could look at some movement that might be beneficial both to the region and to getting this to a position we can get it across the finish line?
Based on this?
Yeah. Or anything.
Yeah.
Based on anything.
I think I would like more time with staff.
Yeah. Well, remember, this is another proposal. If you notice, and this is the other thing I was going to ask, we've now got 4.2, 5.1, TMC modified. Now we've got the TOS PC working draft. At some point, I'd like to simplify this to get it so we're now, instead of having one plan, we're considering we've got 4. So I do think going forward at some point, and if there's any ideas that we could share with the executive director, simplify even the spreadsheet to short.
Mr. Chair, do the CAC 5.1 and we asked that we remove that from the columns?
That's true. We voted CAC 5.1's gone, so I guess we could just take that off. Yeah. It's not your sheet.
The exercise is good to compare all of them, but
I think that's why they left it on there, to kind of show the moving target. And as we focus in on it,
see where things have gone down or things
Yeah.
have gone.
Mhm.
I'd be happy to clean it up and make them consistent with the two remaining options.
Okay, and I, does anybody see a reason not to keep this plan as part of the discussion? Because I think it's showing a lot of compromise and move forward. Obviously, none of us had a time to do a full dive on it, and now I guess we got, 23 days or however many it is to do that. Any other board members have any thoughts or questions, comments?
I would just say, and I'm echoing what Carmine said, that we have been continually looking for ways to bring everybody together. And the efforts of Carmine and Beth on working on this proposal together speak to where the county has been throughout this process, in that we're trying to find common ground. We heard Mayor Romero say at the last meeting 55%, and so that was really a guiding, that was really a place where we wanted to get with this plan. But I appreciate not only the dialogue that has happened between staffs, I also appreciate dialogue that I know is happening between managers, and not just between the county and the city, but I know that Ms. Lesher has been reaching out to the managers as well of the towns, while being respectful of open meeting law. But it was important, I thought, at the last meeting when Mayor Romero made the statement about 55%, and I said after that I thought that everybody else should also say, well, what is something that is of great importance to your jurisdiction? So I think now that we have this plan, which, as you say, Mr. Chair, moves us forward closer to consensus. I know all of us, I just heard Mayor Winfield say it one more time, and I heard Mayor Romero say it earlier, want more time to talk about it with their staffs. But I'm hopeful that when we come back and talk about this on the 30th, that each of us comes back with those jurisdictional concerns and priorities.
Mhm.
And to echo what you're saying there, Supervisor Scott, is going through and doing the percentage breakdowns on my own was eye-opening, because it also shows me how all of us are benefiting. I mean, all the municipalities, if you want to compare it to, your population stuff, there's a lot of benefit. Some projects we'd all agree have more regionalism than others built into it, but that's not the only consideration when we get these projects in our own individual municipalities and regions as well. But the thing I'd really like to have people remember is the project we approved today to purchase 4 more vehicles with using RTA funds cost us 15% of the total benefit.
Mhm.
We had 85% federal match. If you look at all these projects, there's a lot of opportunities to get some match, if not already embedded on them. So sometimes we get wrapped up in, hey, it's 2.345, so it's pessimistic, and 2.765 billion dollars over 20 years. It's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that, because a lot of times we do get outside investment from the federal government and others to bring money to the region. And that, I think, is one of the things we've got to remember. If we don't have these regional funds available, that money's not when it comes.
I just one comment.
Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chair. For the bottom line, I see that you all heard the city of Tucson is 55%. The other pieces that we've been talking about, especially at mayor and council, is we need to be able to use excess revenue to go towards capital maintenance. That's one thing that my colleagues on the council want to be able to use, that excess revenue for capital maintenance of any RTA, previous RTA 1 projects. And then, of course, as I mentioned right now, and I'm just speaking purely, how do I present something that can possibly pass the sniff test from Tucson voters, is that we need to get to be able to share the risk. So if we can get to 50% to start, and I think we're really close, and then take the risk, and towards the end, I think we can possibly get to a good place. I mean, I can't speak to each of my council colleagues, but we have to clear up other situations within the first RTA. But I really appreciate the movement. I really do.
I think we're making progress. Something, Mayor, I would tell you about the capital maintenance, and I've asked the executive director previously to continue to look at how we can fit that in if possible. MAG, because of their concerns about the legality of it, have been, all the 32 members of MAG and 20 have elected not to go into that area because there is statute issues there. And I think we need to find those there may be some things, if we leave this would be my suggestion, if we leave a lot of the additional revenues, and that was a question I was going to have for the executive director also, was how we can show if we've got 360 million, is what you propose, of excess one above the pessimistic. How do we show that in the plan that goes to the voters? If it's going to be for projects, do we have to identify those up front now, or do we? And if it was going to be to capital, could we put it in something? I think that's something we may work through after we come up with the bones of the pessimistic plan with this as the add-on to the top as we go forward, because it may take us some time to figure out exactly how we can do that, and if we can, because to me, the easy way to do that would be take some of that money above that, put it in the fund for capital maintenance. But again, we've got to make sure that that's legal within the statutes.
And is it appropriate to have our attorney reach out to MAG? Because I'd hate to, and just, why did they come up with a legal opinion that it's certain? Because I'd hate to put it in there. I'd hate to get it to the ballot and then all of a sudden find out we can't use it, or there's a reasoning. So if it would be appropriate, if you could just find out.
Absolutely. I'd appreciate if he would reach out, and we can work with Mr. Zucker, the MAG executive director, as well, to provide us their logic and information behind it too. And I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that one.
Be happy to. Just want to remind you that we do have a legal opinion that's in your packet already related to what is allowable and what is not allowable for pavement capital maintenance. And in my conversations with MAG, it's along the same lines. They truly recognized and acknowledged that the entity that owns and maintains and is responsible for prioritizing maintenance is legally responsible for that. And that legal concern came from that perspective, that you can't have MAG prioritize that for you and budget that. Individual entities are responsible.
And that was our understanding years ago. And that's why we rolled in the RTA projects into our capital improvement. But now there's not new information, but recent information saying they looked at it and they said, no.
They just never crossed that path. Right. It's the easiest way to say it. They never crossed that path. Now, that doesn't necessarily prevent that there going to be road projects that recognize rehabilitation needs for long time roads out there. It's just, we've got to make sure that it's obviously legal first.
Right.
And second, it's something that both the municipalities and this board want to venture into.
Right.
We realize that there's a lot of stuff that could go in this plan that's going to relieve the municipalities of some requirements and some funding. It's going to offset them with what they might have to do if they were to go on their own. So I think it's just a balance. I just wanted to let everybody know that it's one of the specific questions that was asked of the MAG director.
Right. Thanks.
Well, thank you both very much, and thank you for everybody in the room who's worked on this. I know it's a coordinated effort. Please don't stop. Not over the line yet. All right. Does anybody have any suggestions for future RTA meetings of any sort?
Let's have them weekly.
And I should have to wear a bow tie as long as we have them on Wednesday. In that case, this RTA meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
That's really more paper than the last.